Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the warm, fragrant twilight of ancient Babylon, a place where time is told not by clocks, but by stars. You're standing barefoot on sun-warmed stones, weaving through alleys that smell like honeyed dates, spiced lamb, and just a hint of whatever's fermenting in those clay jars behind the bakery. It's nearing the evening meal, but don't expect someone to yell, "Dinner's ready," from a second-floor window. Here, time flows differently. It's marked by shifting shadows on ziggurat walls, the soft rising of the moon, and the glittering wink of Venus just above the horizon. No wristwatches. No timers buzzing from a microwave, just the slow, cosmic rhythm of the universe, and maybe a priest muttering to himself while staring at the sky. Now, don't get too cocky. You probably wouldn't survive more than an hour here without accidentally offending some local god or stepping in camel dung. But for tonight, you're not a time traveler on edge. You're a sleepy soul drifting through a land where the stars themselves whisper when to boil the lentils. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in the ancient city of Babylon. It's early evening, the sun already dipping low, casting long shadows over crumbling mud-brick alleys and tiled walkways. The Euphrates murmurs quietly in the distance, carrying with it the scent of reeds and river mud. A flock of ibis sails overhead in a crooked V, their cries sharp against the soft swell of human voices winding down the day. You shuffle along a main road, more like a wide path of packed earth, flanked by homes with flat rooftops and wooden doors etched with protective charms. You pass a scribe rolling up a scroll, merchants haggling over sesame oil, and a sleepy goat blocking traffic like it owns the place. Nobody seems in a rush. There's no bell to ring in the hour. The sky will do that job, as it always has. Time here doesn't tick, it tilts. The Babylonians, brilliant and relaxed in equal measure, rely on the heavens above to nudge them through the day. Right now, they're watching the color of the sky shift from gold to lavender. It's the first sign, evening's almost here. You duck into a small courtyard where a family prepares their meal. A woman stirs a pot over a clay oven, the embers glowing orange beneath it. Her husband pours beer into shallow bowls, thick, yeasty stuff that probably counts as both dinner and hydration. A child chases a skinny dog that looks like it's stolen a fig. Above them, the sky softens further and the first faint star appears. No one says anything, but you sense it. That star means it's time to start plating the food. That star, by the way, it might be Sirius or maybe even Venus, known to the Babylonians as Ishtar, the goddess of love, war, and mildly aggressive timing rituals. When she rises at dusk, it's not just pretty, it's practical. Her appearance might cue not only meals, but offerings, rituals, and the start of the night's temple duties. Think of her as both a divine icon and a cosmic clock. Historians still argue whether Babylonians truly relied on individual stars to schedule daily tasks, or if that's just what we like to think. Some scholars suggest it was more about symbolic alignment than precise timing. Others insist temple priests had it down to a science, or at least a ritualized routine that passed for science back then. You pause near the edge of a small canal. Frogs croak, someone laughs, somewhere nearby a flute begins to play a few lazy notes. You look up. The sky now gleams with half a dozen stars, forming rough patterns you only vaguely recognize. But to a Babylonian, each cluster tells a story, and more importantly, tells when things should happen. Back in the courtyard, the family is now sitting cross-legged on woven mats. The food is simple but hearty, barley flatbreads, lentil mash, and what might be goat stew. Though nobody's advertising that too loudly, you're invited to sit, and you do. The ground is warm. The stars continue to bloom across the heavens, soft and slow, as if someone's gently peeling back the curtain of night. A priest passes by, his robe dusted with ash, holding a tablet and muttering something about Jupiter being late again. You don't ask questions. You just smile and pretend you know what that means. As the night deepens, you realize something else. In Babylon, dinner isn't just a necessity, it's a ceremony. A pause, a moment synchronized with the cosmos. You're not just filling your stomach, you're participating in a dance older than writing, older than kings, older than the city itself. You're dining under a sky that's been consulted like a calendar, a prophet, and a menu. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays like it's had enough of astronomy. A child giggles. The stew is good, peppery, warm, slightly burnt on the edges, but who's judging? As you lean back and look up once more, the stars look different now. Not just specks of light, but signposts. Reminders that even in a world without alarms or wristwatches, people have always known how to mark what matters. And sometimes, all it takes is the rising of a single star to know it's time to eat. You've settled into the rhythm now, your stomach's full, the stars are out, and the heat of the day has faded into something much more manageable, somewhere between cozy blanket and slightly sweaty clay wall. You wander down a narrow lane where soft torchlight flickers against the plastered walls, and you spot something curious, a tall stone pole casting a faint shadow across a square tile. A man stands nearby, arms folded, watching the shadow like it's supposed to do something impressive. You realize with mild amusement that it kind of is. This is a Babylonian sundial, primitive but effective, like trying to microwave popcorn with a candle. And even now, after dark, he's still here, maybe trying to squeeze in one last reading before the night claims the day. You ease closer, pretending to casually inspect the setup. The man glances at you, squints, and points to the base of the dial. You follow his finger and notice faint etchings in the clay. Not numbers, not as you know them, but tiny marks, each denoting a unit of time based on the sun's shadow. Earlier today, that shadow crept across the dial like a lazy cat, telling people when to start chores, say prayers, or, more importantly, begin cooking. Time here doesn't come from clocks, it comes from clever hacks, and the Babylonians were full of them. Some households used gnomons, sticks poked upright into the ground, and gauged time by the angle and length of the shadow. Others had more complex setups involving walls, water clocks, or notched bowls that slowly emptied through a hole, each drip marking the crawl of minutes. Sort of like the world's earliest egg timers, if the eggs in question were made of barley dough and stuffed with dates. But shadows were the fan favourite. It's funny to think how much their day revolved around the sun, not just in a hey it's warm kind of way, but in a serious, coordinated, quasi-spiritual way. You're not just watching for sunlight, you're reading it. The sun's path became a language of light and darkness, and everyone had to learn at least the basics. Miss your cue, and you'd end up out of sync with the city, maybe even the gods. And let's be honest, you don't want to be the guy who messes up temple snack time. Historians still debate how accurate these shadow-based methods were. Some claim Babylonians could estimate time within a 15-minute margin. Others think it was more vibes than precision, a general, yeah, it's probably dinner o'clock kind of situation. But what's clear is that they paid attention. The height of the sun determined when priests chanted, farmers sowed, and scribes took their lunch break, which for some reason always seems to involve onions. It wasn't about minutes ticking down, it was about the dance of light and movement, and the subtle sense that your daily rituals were connected to something vast, flaming, and 93 million miles away. You pass another house, and through a curtain of woven reeds, you spot someone drawing a shadow diagram onto a clay tablet. It looks like a child, maybe 10 or 11, tongue poking from the side of their mouth as they concentrate. You wonder if they even realize they're taking part in a centuries-old tradition, or if they're just hoping to finish fast so they can go steal a plum. Suddenly, a splash. You turn and notice a nearby courtyard where a large clay bowl is slowly draining water through a narrow spout at the bottom. A young boy watches intently, then marks something with a stylus on a small wax board. That's a water clock, or clepsydra. Less poetic than stars, sure, but more dependable on cloudy days. It's also endearingly analog. No blinking screens, no alarms, no calendars with dancing goats reminding you it's someone's birthday. Just clever tools, celestial patience, and a lot of staring at the sky. By the way, the Babylonians weren't the only ones doing this. The Egyptians had their own sundials and star clocks. The Chinese developed intricate timekeeping instruments, but Babylon made a whole culture out of time, out of harmonizing their days with the rhythms of the cosmos. They believed in what you might call a sacred schedule. To eat, sleep, and labor in tune with the movements of stars and sun wasn't just efficient, it was righteous. That belief wove itself into every part of life, from market hours to mealtime blessings to when to burn the good incense. You were, in every sense, dining on time, and the funny part, most Babylonians didn't even need the fancy gadgets. They could tell the hour by watching how sunlight filtered through their courtyard, or by feeling the breeze shift at dusk, or by noticing which bird was calling from the palm tree near the canal. It was intuition honed by generations, timing passed down in the bones. The square you're in is getting quieter, torches hiss. Dogs snore under awnings. Somewhere someone plucks a lyre in a half-remembered melody. You lean against a low wall, gaze up at a velvet sky just beginning to shimmer and feel, oddly, like you know what time it is. Not by seconds, not even by hours, but by mood. By light, by the feel of a city slowing down, aligning itself with a sky that's always been just there, dinner's long over. But time in Babylon never really stops. It just shifts its weight, turns a little, and waits for the next cue from the stars. The stars are sharper now. Like someone wiped the sky clean with a linen cloth soaked in sandalwood oil. You wander through the dim streets with the calm certainty of someone who's got nowhere urgent to be. And in Babylon, that's most people after dinner. You pass a temple, massive, angular, a ziggurat rising like a stairway for the gods. Its upper tiers are hidden in shadow, but you know the real action happens up there after dark, because while the rest of the city sleeps or gossips or tends their goats, a select few are busy watching the sky and recording its every twitch. You find yourself near a quiet courtyard where a few robed figures sit cross-legged, facing the stars like they're attending a cosmic concert. These are the Tupsharu, the scholar scribes, the guys whose job it is to know when Jupiter's going to sneeze or Venus might flirt a little too brightly. They aren't just staring, they're reading. The sky to them is a text, each constellation a sentence, every planetary movement a phrase with subtext and nuance. It's not just astronomy, it's astro-literacy. And weirdly, also scheduling. You quietly sit at the edge, trying not to cough or yawn too loudly. One of the scholars tilts a wax tablet toward the starlight and makes a note with his stylus. Another holds up a small stone device that vaguely resembles a modern protractor, though here it's used to track the angular rise of heavenly bodies. Tonight, they're watching the heliacal rising of Sirius, or Mulkak Desai Essay, as it was called in the local cuneiform. This star's first annual appearance just before dawn signals the turning of the seasons. A time for planting, for purification rites, and yes, for adjusting the dinner time hour. Because here's the thing, the Babylonians didn't separate the sacred from the practical. If a star rose earlier, it meant the gods were shifting their expectations. Farmers planted earlier, priests prepped offerings sooner, and in homes across the city, soup was served at a slightly different hour. You can't say no to divine scheduling. Historians still argue whether heliacal risings were widely understood by common folks or just priestly business, but it's likely the knowledge trickled down. After all, when your neighbour says Ishtar winked early tonight, you'd better get that stew off the fire before it burns. You lean back and stare at the sky, trying to see what they see. Patterns, movements, but also moods. These weren't just burning rocks to the Babylonians, they were messengers. Jupiter, known as Marduk's star, could predict victory or defeat. Saturn, Ninurta, might indicate famine or luck, depending on where it parked itself. It wasn't superstition, not quite. It was structured, repetitive observation woven into generations of habit. They didn't believe the stars told them when to eat. They knew it, the same way you know when the oven beeps. It was empirical, in a deeply ancient way. One of the priests starts explaining something, half to the group, half to himself. He points toward a cluster of stars and mutters a line from a known omen text. You don't catch every word, but the tone is clear. This rising indicates not just time, but timing, an auspicious moment, a good night to finish things. Or maybe begin them. Another scholar taps his tablet and whispers something about the third watch. Babylonian nights were split into watches, 3 long chunks of time marked by star positions. Think of them like cosmic shift work. First watch, the early evening hours. Second watch, the middle. And third watch, pre-dawn. Each watch had associated duties, meals, and even moods. You, lucky guest of the city, are firmly in second watch now, the period where most of the city has gone to sleep, except the scribes, the thieves, the lovers, and maybe one wandering time traveller who's just really invested in ancient dinner routines. Someone nearby passes you a small bowl of date wine. It's sweet, thick, and probably fermented under someone's bed, but it goes down easy. You sip and feel the warmth spread, matching the glow of the stars overhead. It's oddly comforting, isn't it? The idea that every evening people looked up not for entertainment, not out of boredom, but for instruction, for alignment, for peace, and maybe also to whisper a complaint to Ishtar about how dry the lentils turned out tonight. You yawn. Not out of boredom, out of something gentler, that sleepy satisfaction that comes from witnessing a world in balance. The stars gleam. The wax tablets fill with notes. The breeze shifts ever so slightly, brushing past your cheek like a whispered bedtime story. In the distance, a gong sounds, a soft, low ring that indicates the end of second watch. Someone nearby stretches and stands, brushing dust from their robe. Another finishes scrawling a final line of cuneiform. Tonight Jupiter was clear, Venus shone before mid-heaven. All is favourable. You smile. Dinner was on time after all. You wake from a brief doze, still seated on the edge of the astronomer's courtyard. The stars above brighter now, thicker, deeper, like grains of glowing barley tossed across the sky. A gentle breeze lifts the hem of your tunic. Somewhere nearby, an old man coughs, and a clay bowl clinks softly against a stone step. It's now the third watch, the quietest hours of the night, when the air is cool and even the insects seem reluctant to move. But up on the ziggurat, yes, that giant stepped pyramid you glimpsed earlier, there's still movement. You stand, stretch your legs, and decide to climb, slowly. One sun-dried brick step at a time, the ziggurat is Babylon's celestial ladder, built not just to impress but to connect. Earth below, heaven above, and in between, a place where humans tried to peek at the divine schedule, the one that determined everything from war to weddings, to what time the stew should be stirred. At the top, the air feels different. Lighter, quieter, as if even the wind knows not to speak too loudly here. You find two more priests standing beside a set of polished copper discs, primitive yet effective reflecting devices. They're aligned carefully, not to magnify, but to mark. Angles. Positions. The precise moment Venus, Ishtar, rises above the low hills in the east. She's due any moment now. One priest lifts a long pointer and holds it steady against the skyline. The other consults a tablet, muttering dates, star names, and arcane numerical systems that seem impossible to keep in your sleepy brain. But they get it. They know when Venus will rise, and when she does, they'll mark it not just as an astronomical event, but as a signal. Because when Ishtar rises visibly just before dawn, a Heliacal rising, it's not just beautiful. It's meaningful. In Babylonian belief, she's returning from the underworld, bringing news, blessing, or warning, and more practically, she's telling you it's nearly breakfast. But also, dinner times will shift, because her reappearance marks the beginning of a new seasonal phase. A new timekeeping rhythm, a new set of expectations about what happens when. Historians still puzzle over just how much influence individual celestial events had on everyday behavior. Did average Babylonians really know the meaning of a Heliacal rising, or was that priest-only knowledge? Some records suggest public proclamations were made. Others hint it was more subtle, passed down through neighborhood chatter, calendar tablets, and temple announcements carved into clay. You're leaning against the smooth brick ledge now, watching the eastern sky go pale, just the thinnest line of rose creeping upward, and then, there she is. A tiny point of cold light suddenly alive above the horizon. Venus. The priests don't gasp. They don't shout, they nod, make notes, and one of them even looks mildly smug, as if Venus were a guest who always arrives fashionably late, but he called it down to the minute. For you, the moment feels heavier than it should. This isn't just stargazing, this is timing, messaging, connection. Venus has shown herself, and in doing so, she has reminded the city, you live by rhythms larger than yourself. You eat when the heavens say so, you rest when they dim, and when they flare back to life, you listen. Below, the city begins to stir. You descend the ziggurat slowly, feeling your feet connect with each time-worn step, the stone slightly cool beneath your soles. The Euphrates hums in the distance. Fires are being rekindled. Bread is being kneaded in soft, sleepy silence. You pass a group of women sweeping the courtyard, their hair wrapped, their hands quick. One of them glances upward and smiles slightly. She's seen Venus too. And she knows what it means. There will be an offering at the shrine this morning, and the timing of meals for the next few days will adjust by perhaps half an hour, not by decree, but by consensus. Because the sky has spoken. Back in the heart of the city, you spot a young boy rubbing sleep from his eyes, trying to light a torch from a dying ember. His father adjusts a basket on his back, fish to sell, likely caught by moonlight and ready for the morning rush. Their lives too bend around the stars. And here's a curious thought, even the shape of Babylon's meals was curved to the cosmos. Unlike modern meal times, which operate on rigid schedules and alarms, Babylonian meals bent gently, fluidly, to the moods of the heavens. If a planet rose early, dinner might come sooner. If cloud cover hid the stars, the meal might be delayed, guided instead by temple bells or instinct. No one was late, there was no late, there was just right time, and not quite yet. You wander back toward the edge of the temple district, the last stars fading into the pinkish haze of morning. The city is awakening now, but not chaotically, softly, warmly. As if everyone knows their cue, and perhaps they do, because in Babylon the schedule wasn't posted on a wall, it was written in light. You just had to know how to read it. You're strolling now through a residential quarter, the morning sun creeping up behind you like a nosy neighbor. The streets are beginning to swell with sleepy movement, vendors rolling carts, donkeys announcing their disdain for labor, and bakers fanning coals to bake the first round of bread. But there's still a calmness in the air, a kind of unhurried grace. Your nose leads the way, something rich, something savory. You follow the scent around a corner and stumble upon a courtyard kitchen, open air, sun-drenched and wonderfully chaotic. A woman stirs a clay pot over a low fire, her elbow jutting out at just the right angle to say, "Don't bother me unless your hair's on fire." Her daughter pounds something in a stone mortar, probably garlic or leeks, while two younger kids scurry around chasing a chicken that clearly wants no part of breakfast. This is where Babylon gets real. Babylonian food wasn't fancy, but it was good. Comforting, built from the things that grew nearby: barley, lentils, onions, dates, and whatever protein you could coax out of a goat, a bird, or the river. And much like their timekeeping, meals were rooted in a cosmic rhythm. In this house, you're watching the start of the day's second most important meal. The big one comes at twilight, but this morning prep tells you something interesting. Even everyday people, mothers, merchants, servants, cooked with one eye on the sky. You hear the woman mutter something about Shamash already halfway, a reference to the sun god's position in the sky. Translation: it's getting late, and if the stew's not done before the third-hour shadow hits the wall, she'll hear about it from her husband, not because he's rude, but because that's just how it works here. The sun moves, and so do you. You're handed a small bowl of the stew. It's thin but fragrant, barley, leeks, something like dill, and a hint of sourness that might be fermented yogurt or just time doing its work. You sip it slowly and it tastes like comfort, like timing. Like everything is happening exactly when it should. Historians still argue what constituted a proper Babylonian meal. Records are spotty. Some say it was mostly grains and beer with occasional meat. Others point to feast tablets that list dozens of items: cheeses, preserved fruits, honeyed breads, roasted birds. But those were temple feasts or royal banquets. You're in the world of normal people, and here, the rhythm of food mirrors the rhythm of light. Every courtyard has its own sundial substitute, a certain angle of light on the oven's edge, a shadow falling between two bricks. One man you pass even holds up his hand, palm open, measuring how many finger widths the sun is from the top of his neighbor's roof. That's the sign to start baking the flatbread. In another courtyard, you overhear two men chatting while shelling beans. One mentions that Ishtar rose earlier than usual last night. The other shrugs and says, "Means I'll need to pick the figs tomorrow." Not dramatic, not mystical. Just practical, celestial timing woven into the pulse of daily life. And then there's the beer. Oh, Babylonian beer, thick, cloudy, mildly sour, made from fermented barley bread and often drunk through a straw to filter out the floaties. It's not just a beverage, it's a time marker. Brewed at dusk, stored by starlight, drunk when the morning sun clears the upper wall. One old woman swears the best beer comes when Venus rises in Leo. No one argues, she's old and has good beer. You sip from a communal jar, warm from the sun, sour in the way that wakes up your tongue but doesn't offend it. It's surprisingly filling, breakfast, beverage, and probably your recommended intake of sediment for the week, but this meal is winding down now. People scrape bowls, rinse hands, and begin setting up for whatever their trade demands. A potter wheels out his drying racks. A woman unrolls bolts of linen for dyeing. A group of boys haul baskets of dates toward the temple kitchens, likely for some ritual feast you're not yet invited to. Time has moved again, and they move with it. Even the way people clean up reflects the shifting of the day. You notice a pattern. At a certain angle of light, the cloths come out, the ashes are swept. The kids stop chasing chickens, well, briefly. Everything resets for the next phase. And while no one says it outright, they're all watching the light, the sky, the slow ballet of shadows and brightness. It's a kind of choreography. An old, unspoken language of meals and movements tied to celestial cues. And in the background of it all, there's a low murmur. The priests on the ziggurat are chanting again. You catch a few words, names of stars, of gods, of days yet to come. Their prayers aren't just for blessings, they're for order, for timing. For the city to remain in sync with the cosmos, one meal at a time. As you wander back toward the city center, your belly warm and your mind oddly soothed, you realize something. You haven't seen a single clock, and yet nothing feels late. Nothing feels rushed, because in Babylon the stars keep time, and everyone else just listens. The sun is now arcing higher, casting warm amber light across the edges of walls and rooftops, slicing long diagonals through reed awnings and half-drawn linen curtains. Babylon breathes into its day, not with the frantic rhythm of modern life, but with the steady, deliberate pace of people who know there's time for everything, if you trust the sky. Your feet carry you toward the western quarter of the city, past vendors unstacking clay jars, scribes unfurling scrolls, and apprentices hammering bronze with an enthusiasm that suggests they did not sleep through the second watch. The rhythm continues, meals, markets, murmurs, and yet your eyes drift upward. The ziggurat rises above everything still, like a cosmic compass guiding the whole scene. And you notice something now, the ziggurat isn't just ceremonial. It's functional, it does something, or more precisely, the people on top of it do something, something that shapes the pulse of the entire city. You make your way back toward it, weaving through side alleys that carry the mingled scents of charcoal, perfumed oil, and the vague sweetness of rotting dates. You're climbing again, up those now familiar baked steps of sun-bleached brick, step by step as Babylon slowly sprawls out beneath you like a golden tapestry. At the summit, the platform is broader than you remember. Today, the priests are arranging something curious, rows of clay markers, stone pegs, and charred sticks. It looks like someone tried to host a picnic with geometry. You step closer and realize you're looking at a star chart, not just a sketch, a device. This is the Babylonian equivalent of a cosmic calculator, an instrument that tracks the rise and fall of celestial bodies, not only to record, but to predict. It is made not from marble or brass or glass, but from humble materials, clay, wood, rope. It's a star clock, a temple-grade time machine. You glance over a wax tablet resting nearby. It's covered in neat cuneiform lines, recording what seems to be planetary movements, lunar cycles, and maybe even a recipe for lentil stew. Okay, probably not, but you'd believe it at this point. One of the priests, his beard intricately braided and his robe impressively clean for someone exposed to so much dust, starts reciting aloud. He speaks of sidereal time, the position of the stars relative to fixed points, not when does the sun rise, but where is Jupiter now. This system doesn't just tell time, it tells truth, at least according to Babylonian belief. It's dizzying. These people, thousands of years before smartphones or microwave timers, were mapping time not with watches but with stars and sunbeams, rods and ropes. They weren't just observing the heavens, they were cooperating with them. Living beside them, feeding themselves according to them. You notice a young assistant, a kind of stargazing intern, crouched beside one of the clay models. He's adjusting the position of a small peg that represents Mars. He squints, mutters something about 2 fingers above the southern cusp, and nods, satisfied. He's just recalibrated dinner time. Wait, seriously? Yes, it's not a joke. Mars is on the move this month, and that means certain rituals need to be adjusted, and rituals, in turn, influence everything else, including the time food is prepared, shared, or offered. It's not superstition. It's systems thinking with a cosmic twist. When Mars rises late, you delay certain tasks. When Venus appears in a particular quadrant, you expedite others. It's a web of adjustments, tweaks, recalibrations. Everyone downstream, merchants, cooks, bakers, hears the echo and shifts accordingly. Historians still debate whether ziggurats served as pure astronomical platforms or more generalized ceremonial towers. Some believe they were part observatory, part temple, part power symbol. Others argue they were practical, not just symbolic. True time-regulating centers that ensured every priest, farmer and fishmonger in Babylon knew when to rise, when to sow, and when to put the lentils on. You lean on the railing, gazing out across the rooftops and canals, the markets and courtyards. The city feels alive, not in a chaotic, overstimulating way, but like a body in deep, measured breath. And above it all, this ziggurat hums with silent calculations, like a cosmic heart sinking the pulse below. It's not hard to imagine how this knowledge filtered down. A temple runner might carry word to the market. Mars is moving faster, shift the offerings to the 4th hour. A baker hears it secondhand and adjusts his batch schedule. A mother senses the difference and starts dinner early. A child asks why, and the answer is simple. The sky said so. You watch as one of the scholars, clearly the supervisor, judging by the elaborate golden sash draped over one shoulder, etches a line onto a fresh clay tablet. He speaks quietly, but you catch the phrase, "This season, Ishtar's ascent shortens, offerings will begin sooner." There it is again, a subtle cosmic nudge that sets everything in motion. Even now, standing on this baked brick tower under a sky so vast it could swallow you whole, you feel that timing tug. A quiet certainty that everything here is placed, not randomly but deliberately, carefully. As if Babylon itself were less a city and more a dial, a living calendar, a soul in sync with the stars. As you begin your descent, careful not to trip over your tunic, you wonder what it would feel like to live your whole life this way. No digital clocks, no planners. No deadlines buzzing in your pocket, just the sky, the sun. The slow rise of Venus and the steady arc of Jupiter across the horizon. No alarms, just alignment. You pause halfway down, catching your breath. Behind you, the sky has begun to pale. Not quite sunset yet, but close enough that the shadows are lengthening like sleepy arms stretching. Below, the city's beginning to shimmer again, not with noise, but with glow. Fires being stoked, pots being set to boil, people watching the light shift and knowing, deep in their bones, that it's time to prepare the next meal. And it all began up here, with the ziggurat and its sacred calculations, with stargazers in robes, marking time not by what the hour says, but by what the universe sings. You smile, step down onto the next platform, and let gravity carry you gently back toward the scent of bread, the hush of torches, and the cosmic dinner bell that's already starting to ring. The sun sinks lower now, casting golden streaks over the rooftops of Babylon, and you feel the city exhale again. There's something different in the air, like the day is folding itself up and tucking in the corners. You're walking now through the outer edge of the temple district, where the priests' robes don't shimmer quite as brightly, and the sandals scuff a little more. This is where the junior assistants dwell, the timekeepers in training. You find yourself drifting toward a modest courtyard, no towering ziggurats here. Just a low-walled space with a shaded awning, a few clay benches, and several wax tablets laid out on woven mats. A group of younger scribes, maybe no older than teenagers, sits in a loose circle, each holding a stylus and a half-bored expression. They're watching the fading sunlight on a central pole, its shadow stretching long now, like a finger pointing east. This isn't punishment, it's training. Here, Babylon doesn't teach time with clocks. It teaches by making you feel it. An older priest with the deeply lined face of someone who hasn't blinked since last equinox begins to speak, not loudly, but with a rhythm that cuts through the air like the whisper of dry parchment. "How long does it take for the shadow to reach the 3rd notch?" he asks. One of the scribes frowns, counts slowly under his breath, then scribbles something down. Another closes one eye and stretches out his arm, measuring the sun's position with the gap between his fingers. You lean against a wall, watching. It's charming, really, like ancient schoolchildren measuring planetary shifts with the same nervous energy as a spelling quiz. But the task is deadly serious. These interns, if they do well, will one day be entrusted with keeping Babylon in harmony with the cosmos. One wrong calculation, and the high priest might order the grain offering at the wrong phase of the moon. Worse still, a public feast could be mistimed, and suddenly you've got cold stew, angry priests, and maybe a few bad omens to answer for. You catch a glimpse of one wax tablet. It's covered in tiny notations, arcs, dots, and star names etched with care. This isn't just a class in math or astronomy, it's ritual precision. A deeply spiritual act, dressed in the dusty robes of daily discipline. One student gets up and carefully places a small bowl of water on the ground next to the pole. He watches as the sunlight gleams across the surface, timing how long it takes for the reflected light to vanish. It's crude, but it works, and in the silence that follows you realize you're witnessing something rare. This is time, learned by doing. Measured not in minutes but in moments, not by devices but by direct experience. Historians still wonder how deeply this kind of training spread beyond the temple elite. Was every citizen taught basic shadow reading, or was it reserved for these robed apprentices who then passed the rhythms along by example, adjusting temple rituals, announcing seasonal changes, subtly nudging daily life in new directions? We may never know. But here, in this quiet courtyard, it's clear. The future of Babylon's calendar, its ceremonies, even its stew schedules, rests in the ink-stained hands of these kids. You watch as the instructor picks up a flat stone, smoothed by years of use, and places it precisely where the shadow has reached the 5th mark. That, he says quietly, means it's the hour of offerings. Which means it's time to eat. Suddenly the students perk up. Now this is content they understand. From a side room, a few baskets are brought out, warm flatbread wrapped in linen, dates so ripe they practically melt, and a dish of lentils that smells far better than any textbook ever has. The group gathers around, still careful not to disturb the tablet arrangements, and begins their evening meal under the lengthening glow of sunset. You're handed a piece of bread, torn roughly in half, still soft from the fire. It's nothing special. And yet somehow it tastes like celebration, like ceremony. And as the light fades further, someone lights a small clay lamp, placing it carefully at the center of the courtyard. It casts a gentle glow over the students, over the stone markers, over the wax tablets filled with stars and numbers and sacred calculations. The lesson continues, even as mouths are full. One student asks about Mars, why it seems to rise earlier this week than last. Another wonders if the moon's brightness affects when the goddess Ishtar appears. The instructor answers, sometimes definitively, sometimes with a slow shrug and a smile. Historians still argue about that, he says, though he doesn't use the word historians, of course, just scholars, the ones who argue across scrolls instead of star charts. And you realize something else. This isn't just schooling, it's inheritance. These students aren't being trained to know time. They're being trained to carry it, to protect it, to pass it on through rituals and rhythms and the quiet shaping of a city that relies on the stars to stay sane. As the meal winds down, one apprentice pulls out a small piece of palm bark with a pattern carved into it, dots and arcs again, some kind of simplified star map. He holds it up to the darkening sky and tries to align the marks. He misses, adjusts, smiles. It's a small act, but it holds centuries inside it. You glance back toward the ziggurat, its shape now barely visible in the twilight. Somewhere up there, someone is still watching Venus, charting her mood swings, noting her timing like a celestial timekeeper with a crush. Down here, the apprentices clean up, fold their mats, and carefully cover the wax tablets with scraps of cloth to shield them from dew. The lesson ends, but the learning doesn't. It never does, not in a city built to orbit the stars, and as you walk away, back through the echoing streets where torches flicker and laughter drifts from shaded windows, you feel something shift in your chest. Not urgency, not restlessness, just a quiet pull, like gravity, reminding you, even the smallest hands can hold the rhythm of the sky. The stars are blooming again, soft pinpricks scattered across a velvet curtain of dusk. Babylon's heartbeat slows. You feel it in your feet, in the hush of the streets, in the way people begin to speak softer, as if afraid to break the spell of the returning night. You wander, not with purpose but with presence, letting your senses tug you through shadowy alleyways and lamplit courtyards. You've drifted toward the lower markets now, close to the riverbank where the air is cooler, moister, and filled with the layered smells of fish, fig leaves, and the occasional waft of dung from a very opinionated donkey. It's quieter than earlier, though not completely still. A few night vendors linger, selling roasted nuts and date cakes to those out too late or simply unwilling to let the day end. But here, on the edge of the market, is where another kind of timekeeping reveals itself: lunar timing. You notice a group of women seated near large baskets of produce: onions, beans, chickpeas, flat bundles of herbs. One of them points to the moon, just a sliver rising between two rooftops, and murmurs something about the first light of the 8th. The others nod, adjust something in their baskets, and start packing up. You don't need a translator to understand. The moon's phase isn't just a curiosity here, it's a schedule. Unlike the sun and stars which the priests tracked with ceremonial tools, the moon was everyone's clock. Its phases governed markets, baking schedules, washing days, even haircuts. Yes, really, some believed that cutting your hair on a waning moon made it grow slower, which, depending on your preferences and how sweaty Babylon got that day, might have been ideal. You follow one of the women, her arms full of coriander and what looks like dried garlic scapes, as she winds through the streets toward the inner neighborhood. She stops at a small door, exchanges a few copper pieces with a sleepy-eyed teen holding a sack of lentils, and disappears inside. All of it timed by the light above. This is the lunar grocery run. Not daily, not weekly, but timed to the rhythm of the moon. On waxing nights, people buy and store. On waning ones, they use what's left, fast, or prepare offerings. The full moon often coincides with shared meals, both domestic and divine. Historians still debate just how standardized these lunar timings were across the city. Some say temple records aligned everything strictly to lunar calendars. Others believe the rituals were loosely followed, with some flexibility for cloud cover and personal preference. But one thing is certain: no one here ignores the moon. You make your way to a small square where a crowd has gathered, not loud, but present. In the center, an elderly man unrolls a scroll with deliberate flair and begins reading something lyrical, probably a hymn or story or both. Around him, people chew slowly on roasted grains, or sip something thick and warm from clay mugs. The moonlight glows on their faces, and you notice how its silver hue gives everything a soft, almost sacred outline. Someone offers you a mug, some sort of barley drink with a hint of spice. You sip it, and it coats your tongue like warm velvet. You're told, quietly, that it's a moon night tonic, something only made during this specific phase. It's not magical exactly, but tradition says it helps with clarity and dreams. Dreams, that feels appropriate. You look around. No one's in a hurry. The moon is out. That's enough. But time isn't done with you yet. As you settle into the square's edge, you hear a quiet argument between two older men. Nothing aggressive, just passionate. One insists that the black moon, the invisible new moon, is a time for fasting and spiritual rest. The other argues it's the best moment to plant early barley. You're about to interject when a woman nearby chuckles and says, "They've been arguing since Nabonidus was king." You nod, smile, and sip your drink. Even here, among the ordinary people, the stars and moon aren't distant or abstract. They are practical guides. Time, food, celebration, all of it flows from what hangs above. You continue your walk, guided now by lanterns hung from braided cords, flickering just enough to make every wall look painted with light. You notice symbols carved into doorways: moon crescents, stars, spirals, protective marks, calendar marks, cosmic post-its. And then you spot something lovely: a family gathered around a flat clay dish filled with oil. In the center, a floating wick burns low and calm. Beside it, a small plate of dates and crushed nuts, a nighttime ritual. Not loud, not elaborate, just a meal marked by the moon, offered perhaps to a household deity, perhaps just shared in the way that makes time feel intentional. You don't intrude, you just observe. And in that moment, you understand something the historians and scholars sometimes forget. Time isn't just tracked, it's lived. The moon is not just a number in the sky, it's a presence. A gentle companion who tells you when to start cooking, when to harvest your fennel, when to avoid signing contracts, never on a waxing gibbous obviously, and when to gather and remember who you are. You walk a little farther, and a dog trots beside you for a moment before veering off toward a canal. You pause near a house where a man is wrapping fig leaves in bundles and hanging them on a line. "Full moon leaves dry faster," he says, not looking up. You nod, even though you don't totally know what that means, but it sounds like wisdom, and that's enough. Babylon at night feels softer now, lulled not to sleep, but into alignment. There is rhythm in the moonlight, in the scent of roasting chickpeas, in the songs floating faintly from a rooftop 3 streets away. You sit for a moment on a cool stone bench. Above you, the moon drifts between cloud wisps, unhurried. She doesn't blink, she just is. And everyone below her listens, even if they don't realize it. Soon, you'll return to your borrowed mat, let your eyes flutter closed, and maybe dream of stars. But for now, you are still in a city where the moon tells mothers when to soak grain, lovers when to meet by the fig tree, and wanderers like you when to stop walking and simply breathe. You wake slowly, not in your own bed, but on a simple woven mat laid across cool clay. The sounds of Babylon's midnight are different from its twilight, softer, quieter, and yet still very much alive. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes, and realize you're still near the edge of the river district. Someone tucked a reed blanket over you. Kindness, it seems, also follows lunar cycles. It's well into the night now, somewhere in the third watch, and the moon has risen higher, bathing the streets in that silvery, eerie light that makes everything look older, gentler, even timeless. You step barefoot into a narrow alley that winds like a lazy stream, and ahead you hear voices, not loud. Not shouting, just murmuring. You follow the sound to a rooftop where a group of neighbors, wrapped in shawls and blankets, are gathered around a small clay brazier. The fire glows low, sending up spirals of smoke that carry the faint scent of cedar and sweet herbs. No one stops you. You're welcomed with a nod and a spare cushion. One woman passes you a bowl, steamed chickpeas with garlic and honey, midnight snacks, Babylonian style. They're not just here to eat. They're here to talk. Or more accurately, to listen. As the stars shift above, someone begins to speak, an old man with a voice like dry papyrus and eyes that flicker with starlight. He tells a story of the bare star, how it once got lost and wandered into forbidden sky, and how the goddess Ishtar had to guide it home with her jeweled sandals. It's clearly a myth, but no one here cares about literal truth. The story has a rhythm, a cadence. It lulls, it soothes, it keeps time. And in that story is something deeper, orientation. These tales are maps, mnemonic devices, clocks disguised as fables. They tell you which stars rise when, which constellations mean what, and when to expect the first barley sprout. Babylon, you're realizing, wasn't just watching the stars. It was talking with them. Someone else chimes in, offering a joke about how the gods must be using the stars to spy on people who sneak extra bowls of lentil stew after dark. Laughter spreads, but it's lazy, low, a ripple rather than a roar. You chew slowly, savoring the chickpeas, and glance at the sky. Above you, the constellations stretch in familiar shapes, though of course they didn't call them Orion or Leo. They had their own names, their own meanings, their own timing. One man points up to a group of stars just cresting the rooftop. There, he says, when those rise, the river changes. No one questions it. It's just known. Historians still debate how exact these stellar associations were. Did constellations actually predict floods or shifts in trade winds, or was it coincidence repeated enough times to feel prophetic? Maybe both. What matters is that the people here lived like it was true. That certainty, that comfort, gave them structure. And there's something else happening here. Something subtle. These midnight gatherings aren't just social, they're observational rituals. Not religious necessarily, but reverent, a way for the average Babylonian to mark time with their own eyes. No priest required, no sacred scroll, just stars and conversation. You ask a question, carefully phrased, slow and polite. How do you know when the day truly begins? The old man grins. When the bird sings and the stars fade. Then he adds, but only if the owl hasn't spoken first. Everyone nods as if this makes perfect sense. Apparently, the owl's cry before dawn signals a bad omen. Stay inside, skip the river, maybe don't eat anything that's been sitting out since yesterday. Again, it's part superstition, part pattern recognition. The owl might just be reacting to changes in light or temperature. But in Babylon, that bird is a timekeeper with talons. Someone else mentions that if 3 stars twinkle in a line above the eastern gate, it's safe to harvest figs. If only 2, wait 3 more days. And yes, of course, someone tried to cheat the system once and ended up with sour figs and a broken ankle. No one's entirely clear how those 2 facts are connected, but the moral holds. You're beginning to understand that this isn't just passive stargazing, this is participatory timekeeping. The stars aren't just out there, they're with you. They're in your gossip, your recipes, your bedtime routines. They're stitched into the very language of daily life. You stretch back onto your cushion, arms folded under your head, and gaze upward. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then goes quiet. A fig leaf flutters down beside you, and still the stars speak. Your neighbours begin to drift off, some lying back, others slipping away to their homes. One by one, the brazier's coals dim, until only the glow of the moon and the collective exhale of the city remain. You start walking again, tracing a path down from the rooftop, past shuttered windows and empty water jugs. And you realise that Babylon doesn't sleep like you thought it might. It rests, yes, but even in rest, it listens. To gossip whispered under stars, to the creak of woven doors, to the rhythm of breathing shared by people who've grown up knowing when it's time to act, and when it's time to simply be. You pass a home where a mother is quietly humming to her child, rocking slowly beside a flickering lamp. The melody matches nothing in your memory, but you recognize its structure. It follows the third watch beat, long, soft pauses between phrases. Rhythmic like a heartbeat, timed to lull, timed to comfort. You wonder how many songs in this city are written to match constellations, probably more than you could count. The streets are empty now, except for you and the sky. And you feel it, the shift, the moment when night turns its head and begins to whisper of morning. You're still in the dark, but the dark no longer feels full. It feels pregnant, with coming light, with intention. You stop at a wall covered in old chalk drawings, stars, moons, spirals and stick figures holding bowls, a child's calendar maybe, or just boredom scratched into clay. Either way, it's a record of time, of someone trying to mark a moment in the only way they knew how, and that's all Babylon ever did. It marked moments. It gave time texture, smell, shape, not digital, not mechanical, but personal. Human. And now in this hour between deep night and not quite dawn, you stand very still and listen, not for words, not even for sound, but for timing, and it's there. Soft as breath, sure as stars, you've barely moved, yet time has... In Babylon, that's how it goes. The air carries a gentler chill now, not cold, but cool enough that your skin notices. The stars overhead are starting to thin out, just slightly, like someone dimming the theatre lights before a show begins. The moon is lower now, slinking behind the terracotta rooftops like a cat that knows its work is done for the evening. You start walking again, barefoot on dust-smoothed stones. The city is in that strange in-between state, not asleep, not awake, just resting with one eye open. You pass doorways where shadows shift behind reed curtains. The faint murmur of conversation trickles from an open window. Someone's praying. Someone's whispering. Someone's complaining about the neighbour's rooster that hasn't even started crowing yet. And then something changes. A faint orange line appears in the east, far beyond the city walls, just above the palm groves. The sky, still speckled with stars, begins to glow. The shift is imperceptible at first, but then it becomes obvious. Colour returns to the world in small dabs, grey, lavender, gold. The night, once dominant and thick, begins to retreat, and with it comes the sound. A single reed flute, high and soft, playing from a rooftop. It's not a concert, it's a signal. In Babylon, sound, like stars, tells time. This one says, prepare. You follow the music toward the neighborhood temple, smaller than the main ziggurat, but still grand in its way, with carved bricks and painted tiles that shimmer faintly in the blue hour. At its gate, a priest lights an offering flame, its glow catching the silver edges of his robe. You step inside, careful to stay at the edge of the gathering. A few early risers sit cross-legged near a large stone basin. It's filled with water, perfectly still, reflecting the changing sky. One by one they gaze into it, not to see their reflections, but to watch the stars disappear. You watch with them. The sky is paling faster now. Sirius vanishes first, then the bare star. Then Venus, the most reluctant of all, who always lingers like a diver after curtain call. Her descent marks something important, the shift to day, not officially, not by proclamation, but by sensation. When Venus disappears, it's time to begin. Historians still debate the role of these celestial vanishing points in Babylonian scheduling. Some claim exact records were kept of when each star faded in which season. Others argue it was more experiential, something known in the body, passed down not by tablet but by routine. You suspect it was both. These people were scientific in a way that modern minds often overlook. Their instruments were eyes, their metrics were shadows, their truths were lived. The temple basin ripples now, someone's breath disturbing the surface. The moment has passed. The stars are gone. The sky is awake. You step back into the street and see that the city is waking too, but not with an alarm, not with a jolt. It stirs like a cat in the sun. Fires are being rekindled, grains are being soaked, the scent of warm milk, honey, and charcoal begins to drift through the alleys. A woman sweeps her doorstep with a bundle of dried reeds, humming something that rises and falls like the light around her. She looks up, nods at you. She's seen the stars fade. She knows what that means, and now meal preparation begins again. You follow your nose, of course, to the kitchen quarter, an area dense with the smells of baking, roasting, boiling. A place where time isn't measured by bells, but by fire. In a large courtyard, several families are preparing their first food of the day. Clay ovens are already warm, and dough is being flattened on smooth stones. One man is carefully stirring a pot of cracked wheat in goat's milk, tossing in bits of dried date and something green that might be coriander or might just be courage. He's doing it slowly, not lazily, deliberately. You ask why. He points at the rising sun and says, "If you cook fast, the sun gets impatient." You blink. He's grinning. And no one wants an impatient sun. You laugh, but there's something behind the joke, a sense of balance, of deference to time as it flows around them like the Euphrates itself. You don't rush the fire, you don't hurry the dough. You wait until the light hits the wall just so, and then you eat. Children run by with bowls of lentils. Someone drops a clay plate and it cracks loudly on the stone. No one scolds. The rhythm continues. Someone taps your shoulder and offers you a warm triangle of flatbread wrapped in a leaf. You accept it with a nod, take a bite. It's soft, chewy, slightly smoky from the clay oven. It tastes like breakfast. But more than that, it tastes like timing, like the kind of food you only get when someone waited for just the right light, just the right hour, just the right star to vanish. Nearby, a potter opens the shutters of his stall. He looks up at the sun, squints, and says, "Another half turn until I fire the urns." You glance at the makeshift sundial on the ground beside him, just a stone and a stick. But he's right. The shadow's almost at the mark. People begin to gather. Not in crowds, but in waves. Shopkeepers, tradesmen, children with bundles of herbs, scribes with morning scrolls. They don't glance at their wrists. They glance at walls, at rooftops, at shadows. And as you sit on a low bench, tearing your bread into slow, thoughtful bites, you realize something profound. This city does not fight time, it follows it. Listens to it, lets it guide the fire, the meal, the prayer, the pause. No one here is racing a clock. They are moving with a rhythm so ancient, so embedded, that it flows through everything they do, even the smallest gestures. A woman turning her pot toward the sun, a boy wiping the morning dew from a fig leaf, a man checking the color of the sky before opening his stall, are acts of temporal alignment. You lean back, full now, not just with food, but with awareness. The stars may be gone, but their memory still lingers, in the way people speak, in the way they cook, in the way they prepare for the day ahead with calm certainty, as if they've already read the script written across the sky. Because they have, and here in Babylon, that script tells them everything they need to know. The day has officially begun, not with a bang, but with a quiet continuity. You watch Babylon stretch its limbs like a well-rested animal. The sky has shifted from golden haze to pale blue, and shadows begin their slow westward creep. You're no longer a nighttime wanderer. You're now one more thread woven into the city's morning, but you're heading somewhere unusual today, past the riverbank, past the market quarter, toward a massive structure enclosed by stone walls and guarded gates. This is no temple. This is no courtyard kitchen. This is the house of the gods, a palace-like compound at the heart of Babylon's spiritual and civic life. But you're not here for incense or chanting. You're here to witness something both sacred and strangely administrative, the preparation of temple feasts. Here, time is kept differently. not by the movement of shadows across rooftops or old men squinting at the moon, but by divine calendars carved into clay. Massive tablets lined with tight cuneiform dictate which gods eat what, when, and how. Yes, you heard that right, the gods have meal plans. And they are very specific. You're led through a shaded colonnade into a large open-air kitchen, where the scale of everything feels exaggerated. Enormous clay ovens, rows of steaming cauldrons, dozens of workers slicing, stirring, stacking. One scribe stands at a podium, tablet in hand, calling out instructions like a conductor guiding a very starchy orchestra. 3 measures barley mash for Enlil, 4 loaves soaked in fig syrup for Nabu, beer offering to be poured when the sun crosses the second marker on the north wall. This is culinary theology at its finest. Historians agree. Babylonian temple meals were as much about timing as they were about ingredients. Certain offerings had to be made at exact celestial alignments. If a particular planet was in retrograde, or rather if a priest interpreted it that way, you didn't serve goat, you served duck, or maybe you fasted. Or burned something as a stand-in and apologized profusely. You stand near a group of cooks shaping barley cakes into discs, scoring them with a stylus to mark which god they belong to. A woman tells you with a wink, if you get the wrong god's loaf on the wrong altar, best hope your stars are in good alignment, friend. You chuckle, but it's only half a joke. The gods were believed to eat these meals spiritually, not physically, but that didn't make them symbolic fluff. The food had to be real, timed, and flawlessly executed, down to the exact moment a star crossed a meridian line chalked on the floor. One wall of the courtyard has been painted with a massive diagram of the sky. Not decorative, functional. It shows star positions, eclipse cycles, lunar phases. It's a timetable more complex than any train station, and it governs everything in this compound. You're guided toward the rear kitchens where the excess from divine meals is being cooled and portioned. Why? Because in Babylon the food offered to the gods is not wasted, it's recycled. Temple workers, priests, and elite citizens are fed from these offerings after the rituals. The meals must first ascend metaphorically to the heavens, timed to a star's movement or a god's attributed hour, then descend quite literally into the hands of the priestly class. It's a divine food chain, structured around celestial punctuality. You sit with a group of kitchen aides taking their break under a sloped roof. They eat from palm leaf bowls, barley stew with lentils, strips of dried fruit, a slice of honey-soaked bread that might have been part of a ritual not 15 minutes ago. One of them offers you a bite, you accept. It tastes like tradition and timing. One of the men says, "This one's from Marduk's morning feast." He chews, shrugs. "The sun was late, so we were too." Another adds, "Jupiter was in the wrong quadrant," they said, "so no eggs today. Omen didn't permit it." You raise an eyebrow. "The stars said no eggs." The woman beside you laughs. "Don't question it, you'll still be hungry." It's easy to smile, but there's a seriousness beneath their jokes. Time isn't a tool here, it's a commandment. The schedule isn't just about being efficient, it's about being in sync with the divine. If you eat out of turn, you're not just wrong, you're out of step with the god's intentions. Historians still question how precisely the Babylonians managed these alignments. Were these timekeeping systems accurate to the minute, or were they flexible, more symbolic than strict? Tablets show evidence of both, rituals timed down to the degree of celestial inclination, and others left vague, with notes like, "as the moon returns to fullness." Perhaps both coexisted, much like the city's own blend of science and faith. You finish your borrowed barley stew and return the bowl. A boy collects it and rinses it in a stone basin that smells faintly of salt and ash. You stand, stretch, and glance again at the painted sky map on the wall. A priest is updating it with fresh chalk, adding a mark near what must be Mars. He steps back, nods to himself, and somewhere, you suspect, a cook is quietly changing the dinner menu because of that one line. You make your way out of the temple complex, passing rows of carved lion statues and incense altars that still faintly smoke from the morning offerings. The sky overhead is now fully awake, blue, hot, humming with the invisible machinery of a world timed by stars. But even outside the temple, you see its effects. A merchant shades his eyes and glances upward, waiting for the sun to hit the lintel of his shop before opening. A boy runs past you, clutching a scroll and shouting something about the 5th hour and the fishmonger's better hurry. Even the pigeons on the roof seem to coo in sync with the shifting light. You pause beside a public fountain, scoop a handful of cool water to your lips, and listen. There's no bell, no announcement, no priest shouting orders in the square. But Babylon knows, it knows that now the second meal of the day will begin to cook, not because it's 12 o'clock, but because the sunlight says so, because Venus has disappeared, because the lunar curve is right, because a priest marked Mars on a painted wall and changed the stew recipe, because time in Babylon doesn't tick, it glows. It rises, it simmers until ready, and when it's ready, you eat. The midday sun is heavy now, thick and golden, pooling in every crevice of Babylon's walls, rooftops, and alleyways like melted honey. You're not sweating so much as steeping, and the whole city seems to fold itself inward, slowing down to match the angle of the sun. It's not nap time exactly, but it's close, a lull, a hush between the chapters of the day. But inside one particular home, a modest, two-level brick structure wrapped around a shaded courtyard, there's a different kind of energy. The midday meal is underway. Unlike the dawn snack or the twilight feast, this meal is less about ritual and more about timing for survival. You step into the courtyard where a mother, two daughters, and an elderly grandmother move gracefully around a central hearth. Clay pots bubble quietly, spoons clink against bronze bowls. A cat lies sprawled in the corner, wisely doing nothing at all. You sit quietly in a corner, observing. This is no banquet. It's a functional, nourishing pause. Lentils, leeks, sour milk, a handful of soaked chickpeas, maybe a few dates. But even here, even now, time is present. Not from a clock. From the sun. The youngest daughter occasionally glances at the back wall, where a faint line has been etched in charcoal. When the shadow of the fig tree crosses that line, she explains in a whisper, it's time to remove the pot from the fire. She smiles. It burns the bottom if you wait too long. You chuckle. It's such a human thing. But also so Babylonian. Timing meals by sunlight isn't just about heat, it's about rhythm, order, intuition. And as it turns out, keeping your stew edible. Outside, a neighbour calls out a greeting. A boy returns from the market with a bundle of herbs. A priest walks past the doorframe, muttering to himself as he reads from a palm leaf scroll. He doesn't look up, but you hear him say, "Sixth watch, third mark, prepare the incense." Somewhere, someone is about to eat, or pray, or both. You dip a hunk of bread into the stew. It's thick and smoky, heavy with onion and something sour, fermented yogurt or tamarind maybe. The flavour is ancient, simple, and deeply tied to the moment. You can't imagine eating this at night. It tastes like sunlight. The grandmother sits beside you, her hands resting on her lap. She tells you, slowly, that her mother used to mark the hours by the direction pigeons sat on the temple's upper beams. If they all faced east, you were late. If they faced west, you had time. She smiles and closes her eyes. They always knew. Historians rarely write about this kind of timekeeping, the unwritten clock of women, kitchens, and the quiet math of shadows. It's not in the official cuneiform records, but it lives in gesture, in memory, in the angle of a clay lid and the smell of barley at the right stage of browning. You finish the last bite of your meal and help rinse the bowls in a large clay basin. The water is warm from the sun, laced with lemon peel and herbs. One of the daughters laughs and splashes her sister, who yelps and nearly drops a ladle. The grandmother doesn't open her eyes, but says, "Careful, if you spill, the next full moon will come with a cough." Another superstition, or maybe another observation, passed down through generations who saw just enough connections between things to call it wisdom. As the bowls are stacked and the pots are covered, the courtyard falls into silence again. Not because there's nothing to do, but because this is the hour of pause. In Babylon, timing isn't just about activity. It's about inactivity too, about knowing when to stop, when to wait, when to simply let things settle. You sit beneath the fig tree, its leaves casting gentle flickering shadows across your arms. You watch as the sunlight shifts, crawling along the etched charcoal line on the wall. It's like watching a living calendar, no ticking, no buzzing, just movement and meaning. One of the daughters picks up a wooden comb and begins slowly untangling her sister's hair, humming softly. The melody matches the rhythm of the shadows. You're not imagining it, you're feeling it. The harmony between daily life and celestial timing, even something as small as brushing hair, is done in time. You look up again at the sky. The sun has passed its peak, the light is changing, mellowing, you know what that means. In a few hours, the city will begin to stir again. The twilight meal, the biggest of the day, will begin preparation. Fires will be lit. Ovens will be stocked. People will glance at the sky, searching for Venus, but not yet. Now is the middle, the breath between. You walk through the neighborhood, slower now. You're not sightseeing, you're sinking. A shopkeeper leans on his stall, waiting for the breeze that always arrives around this time. A boy naps on a rolled-up carpet, face buried in his arm. A woman adjusts a canopy to block the light that's suddenly creeping across her storage jars. Everyone's watching something, even if they don't know it. And above it all, the sun tells time. It reflects off golden brick. It glints from the metal tips of temple spears. It slips between woven shutters and lies softly across bowls of dates left out to dry. You pause in an alleyway and listen. There's a rhythm to this silence. Not emptiness, expectation, not laziness, alignment. Babylon isn't just waiting for the next task. It's resting in place, anchored by a timekeeping system that isn't separate from daily life but woven into it like the threads of a linen tunic. You feel your own heartbeat slowing. You're part of it now. Not a visitor, a participant. The city has welcomed you not just with food and firelight, but with timing. And it will welcome you again at sunset, when the stars return and the next great celestial dinner bell rings. But for now, you sit. You breathe, you wait, in perfect rhythm with the oldest clock of all. The afternoon unfolds like a scroll, slowly, deliberately, and with that peculiar Babylonian blend of warmth and weight. The air is dry, the light shifting from bright to burnished, and shadows begin to lengthen along the city's mud-brick walls like ink smears stretching across clay tablets. You find yourself wandering toward the far side of the city, away from temples and markets, away from ritual and routine. This is the craftsman's quarter, less ceremonial perhaps, but no less attuned to time. Here, timing isn't divine, it's material. You pass a row of stonecutters hunched over slabs of limestone. The rhythmic tap-tap of bronze chisels rings out like a metronome. Every strike is purposeful, measured. You stop to watch, curious, and one of the workers, shirt damp with sweat, explains without looking up. The light has to be right to carve letters. He squints at the tablet. Too late and the shadows lie. Simple, profound. Babylonian. Further down the lane, you see weavers stretching long threads across wooden looms. A woman wipes her brow and says to her daughter, "We stop when the thread turns gold." She points to the fading sunlight slanting across the yard. Sure enough, the pale fibers now gleam faintly, catching fire with the angle of the sun. The workday here doesn't end with a whistle. It ends when light tells you it's time. In a corner workshop, a potter shapes clay on a slow-spinning wheel. His hands are coated in soft red earth. You ask how he knows when to stop turning. He smiles, points upward, not to the sun but to the swallows nesting on the eave above. When they land, he says, the wind will change. That means it's time to dry the clay. Even the birds are timekeepers. Historians might argue over how formal this type of timing was. Was it consistent, widely understood? Did swallows truly guide schedules? Maybe not officially, but functionally, absolutely. In Babylon, you don't just measure time, you observe it, and when you do that long enough, everything becomes a clock. You continue down the lane and into a small public square. A group of children chase each other around a dusty fountain. An older man naps in the shade of a fig tree, head tilted back, mouth slightly open as if dreaming of better irrigation. A few teenagers sit on a low wall, arguing, loudly but lazily, about whether the moon will rise red or silver tonight. One of them says, "Red means rain, you'll see." The other snorts, "You just want to skip washing the fish racks." A third chimes in, "If it rains, no dinner under the stars. You'll miss Ishtar." And there it is again, the stars as meal planners. You find a place to sit on the edge of the square, half in shadow, half in sun. You listen, not for noise, for indications. A boy runs past with a bowl of flour. A woman carries firewood toward her home. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks 3 times, the kind of bark that tells the neighborhood it's nearly time to light the ovens. You begin to smell it, the shift from midday to evening meal prep. Smoke rises lazily from new fires. The scent of roasting garlic, spiced oil, and barley bread begins to curl through the air. The city, which had felt paused just an hour ago, is now gently restarting. You stand and follow the smoke, not in haste. In step, you reach a courtyard where several families are gathered. This isn't one home, it's communal. Large clay ovens line the wall, pots bubble on wide stone hearths, a man turns skewers of fish over hot coals, humming tunelessly. Children shape balls of dough, pressing them flat with the heels of their hands, and above it all, in a sky turning indigo, the stars begin to reappear. The first to show herself is Ishtar, Venus, rising in the east like a celestial chef's bell. One woman looks up, nods and says, "There she is." No one claps, no one prays, but 5 people immediately add onions to their pots. It's time. You help where you can, fanning a fire, handing over a water jug, tasting a spoonful of stew when asked. The food here is humble, but made with a precision that feels sacred. Roasted lentils, thick flatbreads, mashed dates, fermented yogurt, fish wrapped in fig leaves. And all of it timed not by recipe books, but by the return of the sky. Someone asks you to help set a mat on the ground. It's not much. A woven reed square, patched and faded, but it's been laid in the same spot for years. "That's where the stars fall," a boy tells you. You look up and realize, yes. The corner of the mat is aligned to catch the starlight as it rises above the city's edge. Dinner by starlight, scheduled by the cosmos. You sit, the food is passed around. The mat is warm from the day's heat, the air now cooling, the sky deepening to a dark silk filled with tiny white pinpricks. No one counts minutes. They eat slowly, as if time doesn't pass here but instead gathers. Conversation flows, soft, circular. Someone tells a story about a cook who mistook Saturn for Jupiter and made the wrong stew. The gods were displeased. No one believes it literally, but the message is clear. Know your sky. And as you eat, you find yourself watching the stars more than your food, not because they demand it, but because they deserve it. You understand now, Babylon's meals are never just about hunger, they're about participation in the cosmos. Every bite, every ladle, every sizzling pot is part of a grand, glittering rhythm, written not in books, but in light. The meal winds down, the plates are cleaned with soft bread and scraped into bowls for the neighborhood dogs. Someone plays a harp. Children lie on their backs and trace constellations with sleepy fingers, and you, full, grounded starlet, realize you are exactly on time. Not early, not late, just right. Because here, in the fading warmth of the day and the cool promise of night, you have eaten not just a meal, but a moment aligned, a moment eternal. A moment timed perfectly by the stars. Night has returned fully now. Babylon is blanketed once more in a hush, not of silence but of stillness, like the breath between two thoughts. The stars shine high and sure, and in every corner of the city something ancient seems to stir. Not the gods, perhaps, but the memory of them, the sense that timing itself is sacred, and the night is no exception. You're walking again, your feet instinctively taking you in the direction of the eastern gate, where the sky is always clearest and the ziggurat looms like a great sleeping watchman. But tonight, you're not climbing. You're walking a different path, toward the remnants of an older quarter. Older even by Babylonian standards, quiet, crumbling. A place where the rituals have faded, but the memory of timing still echoes through stone and shadow. You pass what remains of a wall once painted with celestial maps, now chipped, faded, but still decipherable if you squint. You pause. Even here, in a forgotten corner, someone once charted time by the stars. A voice startles you. An old man, seated on a bench barely more than a plank balanced between 2 bricks, calls you over with a flick of his wrist. He's wrapped in a faded shawl and holds a small oil lamp in one hand, cupping it carefully to shield the flame. "You're walking too fast," he says. You slow immediately. Because of course pace is part of timing, he points upward with his lamp hand. "See those 3 stars? That's the final meal marker. You look, they're faint, but there, 3 stars in a shallow curve just clearing the horizon. In the old days," he says, "that meant it was time to bring in the date pots. Close the shutters, say thanks." He doesn't elaborate on who the thanks go to. He doesn't have to. You sit beside him for a while. The lamp flickers and the stars deepen. After a long pause, he tells you a story about a time when Babylon faced a terrible drought. The rivers ran thin, the sun burned too long, but the priests, he says, didn't panic. They waited, they watched, and one evening, just as Venus rose half an hour earlier than expected, they knew the pattern had changed. The rains would come, and they did. Now, whether that's true, who can say? Historians argue, as they always do, about how much real predictive power Babylonian star-watching had. Some believe the entire system was more religion than science, full of post hoc interpretations and symbolic guesswork. Others insist the Babylonians, in their ziggurats and shadow-marked courtyards, were tracking something real, something vast and verifiable, even without telescopes or calculators. You think about all of this as the old man nods off beside you, his lamp dimming. You leave him there, gently, and continue walking, not with purpose, but with rhythm. You cross a small bridge over a canal, its surface mirroring the stars like a quiet cosmic copy. You pause there, hands on the rail, staring down at the reflected sky, and it hits you. Babylon isn't just under the stars. Babylon is the stars. Its people eat, work, rest, and rise with them. Its ovens are lit by moonlight. Its children learn to count by constellations. Its scribes inscribe dates according to the first appearance of Sirius or the vanishing of Saturn. Even illness, dreams, marriages, and harvests are timed not by superstition but by observation. The stars are not symbols here. They are schedules, they are promises. You make your way back toward the temple square, now deserted save for a few sleepy guards and a wild dog curled up beside a torch stand. The great ziggurat looms quietly above, its top half swallowed by the night sky as though trying to return to the place it measures. And then you stop, because now the stars are doing something different. The constellation of the lion, Labu in the local tongue, has tilted. You recognize it from earlier. It's a minor change. Barely noticeable, but someone, somewhere would know. A priest. A baker, a potter's apprentice. Someone would see that angle shift and know what it meant. Tomorrow's bread will rise slightly later, the offering schedule will adjust, and dinner. Dinner will be just a little bit delayed, because the stars are not silent, they inform, they suggest, they guide. As you sit on the edge of the courtyard watching this quiet adjustment in the sky, you hear a faint rustle. A woman emerges from a side door, carrying a small basket. She places it on the ground, figs, bread, a few dried fish, and looks upward. She waits. You know what she's doing. She's offering to the night, not to a god directly perhaps, but to the system, to the rhythm, to the slow, steady pacing of time that has fed her family, raised her children, and watered her garden. She stays there, eyes closed, breathing in time with the stars. And you simply sit, and for the first time in a long time, you don't check a watch, or a sundial, or even the angle of a tree's shadow. You just feel it, that perfect wordless sense of being on time with something far greater than yourself. And in that moment you understand the quiet brilliance of Babylon. This isn't a city that measures time, it's a city that moves with it. The city is quiet now, not hushed in fear or emptiness, but steeped in that sacred silence that only comes at the end of a perfectly timed song. Every star is out, every fire has burned down to a flicker, even the restless breeze has stilled. And Babylon, magnificent and mud brick and eternal, lies stretched beneath the sky like an old storyteller who has finally run out of words. You walk slowly now, the dust cool beneath your feet, the sky familiar overhead. You've wandered this city all day through shadow and sun, through barley bread and star charts, and now you're heading back, though you're not quite sure to where. Because here, in Babylon, home isn't a place, it's a moment. You pass a final neighborhood courtyard where a group of elders sits in near silence, legs stretched out, backs resting against stone walls warmed by the memory of the day's heat. One of them hums, not a tune exactly, more like a pulse, a note kept steady to match the ticking of the stars. Another fans herself with a bundle of date fronds, each movement slow, deliberate. And beside them a boy, barely 10, maybe younger, traces lines in the dust with a stick, drawing constellations the same way his father and grandfather likely did before him. You crouch beside him. Which one's that, you ask softly. The goat, he says, not looking up. When it stands above the roofline, it means my uncle's coming home soon, always does. A pause. My mom says when the goat walks sideways, it's time to harvest lentils, you smile. No one told him that in a temple. He learned it, in shadows, in stories, in rhythms. Historians would call it folk astronomy. Scholars might file it under agrarian superstition, but here it's truth. Truth measured not in degrees or devices, but in moments lived again and again under the same slow-moving sky. You stand, stretch, and nod your farewell. The boy waves. The elders barely stir. The night holds them like a soft blanket. You head toward your final stop, your resting place for the night. A modest rooftop, already made up with woven mats and a low clay pillow. You climb the steps slowly, feeling the softness of fatigue settle into your bones. Not the exhaustion of modern chaos, but the earned sleepiness of a body in rhythm with its surroundings. You lie back, and there it is, the entire sky framed just above the wall's edge. No roof. No city noise, just the stars and the occasional rustle of date palm fronds brushing one another like old friends murmuring secrets. The ziggurat stands in the distance, faintly lit at the very top by a single flickering flame. Somewhere up there, a priest is still watching the stars, probably sketching another chalk line, adjusting another ritual time, shifting tomorrow's meal plan by a few heartbeats. You breathe in and then out. And you remember everything you've seen, the family courtyard, the apprentice timekeepers, the clay clocks, the moonlit fig bundles, the temple meals timed to Jupiter, the bread shaped by Venus's rising, the stew lifted from the fire exactly when the goat passed overhead. It's funny. In a city without watches or alarms, without apps or alerts, you've never felt so on time, because time here isn't a demand, it's an invitation. And as you lie there, beneath the stars, eyes heavy and heart full, you understand the quiet brilliance of how the Babylonians timed dinner, not by pressure but by presence, not to control the world, but to move with it. They didn't conquer the sky, they cooperated with it. They listened, and in return, they lived lives so beautifully, so effortlessly in sync, that even their meals, those humble, fragrant, steamy bowls of lentils and barley and love, became expressions of something cosmic. And now, your own breath slows. The last sounds of the city fade, and above you, the stars keep doing what they've always done, shining, timing, telling you without words, sleep now, it's time. The mat beneath you is warm, cradling, the air still. A soft breeze drifts across your cheek like a memory you forgot you loved. All around, Babylon sleeps, not in silence, but in stillness, like a city that knows it has done everything it needed to, exactly when it needed to. Above, the stars trace their ancient paths. Slow, sure, unchanged, the same stars that watched the bread rise, that told the priests when to burn the incense, that whispered to children when to come home for dinner. They gleam without urgency, without noise, just steady, patient light, humming with a rhythm older than timepieces. You feel yourself loosening. Thought unravels, breath deepens. You remember the taste of warm bread, the way the oil flickered in a courtyard lamp, the way a stranger shared barley beer under a fig tree. Everything in this city, every footstep, every dish, every prayer, offered with perfect timing. You don't need to think anymore. The stars are doing that for you. And now, as your eyelids slip closed and your body melts into the calm of ancient stone and starlight, you realize something simple and profound. You are not late. You are not early. You are exactly where you need to be, at the perfect hour, in the quiet company of a city that listened to the heavens and lived beautifully by their song. Good night, time traveler. Sleep deep, sleep soft. Sleep in rhythm.